G'day, this is Mike Rudd of the legendary Spectrum with John Broughton on Retrospectives on 3SER KC Radio.
Someday I'll have money isn't easy, come by the time...
Originally, Mike?
And still am, as a matter of fact.
Still am?
Yes, misplaced New Zealander.
Uh-huh. What were you doing musically over there before you made the move?
Well, I had a band called the Chance R&B, CHANTS R&B, and that was a fairly successful band, albeit we didn't actually move away from our residence gig, the one we had in Christchurch. We did for about a couple of years straight, or more or less straight, and we managed to record in that time, and we had a couple of reasonably well-placed singles before we left for Australia. Hitting Melbourne was fairly intriguing. We were, although we were ostensibly, I suppose, an R&B or blues band more particularly, we were fairly eclectic compared with the bands that we met here, who were, like, you were either blues, doing straight blues, or this or that. We did a kind of range of stuff, including Tamla and straight blues and so forth. So we had a fair diversity of sound in the band, and so meeting this head-on was fairly damaging for us, actually. It inevitably split the band because there were kind of inherently two different directions in the band, and so after about 3 months we kind of split. Although we'd played a number of places around town, including the Catcher, which was fairly notorious for its day. And
Bill, tell us about the Lost Souls.
That was basically a band with some schoolmates and I who had left school and not seen each other for a few years, and then through a sequence of events, probably about 3 years after we all left school, we all ended up in the same band and had instant success winning the Melbourne Battle of the Bands, as they were in those days, which was a recording contract and some money. And now I think about it, we never saw the money. We never saw our manager.
What about the recording contract? That happened?
Yeah, we went up to Sydney, and a guy called Putt actually produced us. He's quite a big dude now in America somewhere. And they were original songs, and it got to about number 8, I think, here in Melbourne, way back when. And we were so green, it was way before green. And basically we worked hard for a couple of years, and got ripped off blind by our management.
Party Machine.
yeah, well, that was the band that I ended up in after the demise of the Chance, and it was a bit of a departure for me because I'd never played bass before, and I joined as bass player. And I think it was basically in response to a demand. I mean, they were looking for a bass player, and I turned up and did the audition for them, and we got on well. So that was the start of my stint with the Party Machine. And the Party Machine, even in those days, was a fairly kind of novel band, because although they didn't do all originals, there was a sprinkling of originals there, and there weren't that many bands doing original stuff. And Hannaford, of course, and Ross were a couple of amazing musical people, most amazing. I really enjoyed the time I saw the Pink Finks before the Party Machine, and I'd seen a gig, and I was really impressed with Hannaford. I thought he was fantastic, and Ross was terrific. So I was looking forward to it, and as it turned out, the next 2 years were really entertaining. We did the most, I suppose, outrageous thing that happened was Ross reprinted some of his lyrics, and they were distributed by Go Set, which was the kind of juke of the day, and they were banned by the local authorities in Victoria, and it was fairly sensational. Made Truth headlines.
Did it really? Oh, good old Truth. Still doing it. The song Make Your Stash, which was on the first Spectrum album, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah,
is that left over from the old Party Machine days? Because Ross wrote that, didn't he?
He did. In fact, he left for England and joined Procession, and I think that broke up the Party Machine basically after the 2 years. And it was while he was over there that he became acquainted with the works of Gustav Holst, and that was based on one of his pieces from the Planets Planet Suite, and he basically wrote it for the procession, I guess, but brought it back from England when he came back and donated it to us, which we were very grateful for.
Uh-huh.
And so we recorded it.
Okay, we might whip into that. Well, we might get you to strap on your guitars and throw a live one at us.
Okay, this is a number which we're doing currently. We're doing more of the acoustic kind of venues at the moment, and we're either doing it as a duo or a trio. This is one of the numbers we do as both. Not the original I Wonder Who's Kissing Her Now, but the modern angst-ridden version. She's always in my dreams, every day and every night it seems. I wonder who's kissing her now. She's there all the time, it's driving me out of my mind. I wonder who's kissing her now. Yeah. I'm the fella left standing out here on the landing. I wonder who's kissing her now. She won't let me in. I'm Jules and Jim to her Catherine. I wonder who's kissing her now. Sing it. I wonder who's kissing her now. 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 I know she is free. I shouldn't be letting this happen to me. I wonder who's kissing her now. She cuts like a knife. I should get on with the rest of my life. I wonder who's kissing her now. Ooh, yeah. I wonder who's kissing her now. 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 Kissing her now, kissing her now. I wonder who's kissing her now. Kissing her now. Kissing her now. Kissing her now. Kissing her now.
Had a dream beginning with Spectrum, number one hit with your first recording. How hard was it to get across to audiences that the rest of your music wasn't like that one song?
Well, we kind of covered that with one of our kind of big recording faux pas, because the single wasn't included on the album Spectrum Part 1.
That's right.
And it was for that very reason, because we figured the single was a one-off and it was pretty atypical compared with the rest of the tracks, which were mostly like 10 minutes, even longer. In fact, I think there was only 6 tracks on the Part 1 album. So we kind of covered that. But there was quite a... well, I don't know, I think people kind of accepted it, really. Once we did it, it was kind of impressive, you know, the kind of stuff we were doing. So impressive in its own right. So people made the adjustment. They go, okay, all their material isn't like that, but okay, this is different. I think there was a lot more open attitude then, even though a lot of the stuff wasn't being played on radio. People were kind of ready to accept something different.
Yeah, a bit
like
lot harder to do that now, I'd imagine, though.
I reckon.
Yeah.
I would say impossible.
Yeah, and they're impossible.
Like the record company would say now, the single is going on the album, even with a big sticker saying featuring the single.
Yeah, exactly.
And make the rest of the stuff like that.
like that as
please.
well, please, or else. Was there any master plan to sell the band overseas?
Later on there was. Round about the Miles Ago period, we started getting reviews from overseas, unsolicited reviews from overseas, from John Peel and a few other people. And so we interpreted that as interest, and we started to think about looking overseas. But at that stage, I think the cracks had started to appear in Spectrum. And we'd kind of split, anyway, Spectrum had split its activities between Spectrum, the concert band, and Indelible Mertzeps, which was the kind of more portable version, which was supposed to do the pubs, which were just coming into vogue then. I mean, I have to remind people that were there and people that weren't there that the pubs weren't really happening then. There was discotheques, which were kind of clubs, and there were dances where no alcohol was allowed ostensibly, but people used to drink outside and then come to the gig and tip over the band if you were having a real bad night. But there weren't really any pubs, and that scene started to open round about then. So we created Mertzeps, which was supposed to cope with that kind of side of things.
Right.
And but still, mainly, I guess the Spectrum did the things like the TF much ballrooms, and Bertie's and Sebastian's, where we could get away with doing that sort of stuff, and Mertzeps did the other things.
Mm-hmm. So Mertzeps was a financially inspired thing. It was.
Yeah, I guess it was. Well, it was just that there weren't that many venues for Spectrum to play.
Mm-hmm. What about the old Sunbury festivals? What are your memories of those? Or don't you have any?
Yeah, the one I remember the most, I forget the others, but the one I remember was we did a gig at Sydney Town Hall. I think it was on Saturday night or something, and we walked out of the Sydney Town Hall at about 12:30 at night. All of us crammed into a car, and we headed off towards Sunbury. And the road crew, which was one guy at that stage, was to pack up the gear and follow us in the truck. So we did the gig in Sydney, drove straight through to Sunbury, fell out of the car and sort of walked around in a daze. The roadie turned up and they put our gear up and we played. That's about all I can remember from it.
That's about
Other
it.
than that Thorby was there and it was real loud. And, the conditions were pretty crappy, really. But other than that, and the others we did, I don't remember at all.
I think if it was bad for us, it was probably worse for the audience. I mean, but mind you, most of them were in no fit state to know what was going on.
Yeah.
But no, it was kind of fun. We always got a great reaction from big crowds. Whenever we played for big crowds, we had a few big crowd type numbers. So that worked quite well for us.
Well, perhaps I can refresh your memory a bit. I got to hear it. What were the circumstances leading to the dissolving of Spectrum?
Mark left to join In Focus, which was Doug Parkinson's
band, yeah.
And we got Ray Arnott on drums, and that was gave us another year or so of life. But when he decided to leave, we thought, well, okay. Oh, I think Lee
Lee had gone by then.
had gone by then. Okay, yes.
Lee had gone, and we'd got a guy called John Mills from Canberra, a young bloke. And then Ray decided to leave, so he was joining Wilson in Mighty Kong. In fact.
That's right. Yeah. So we thought, well, we can't really have another membership change and sort of keep the original kind of thing going, the original idea going. Well, we were very altruistic in those days. But so yeah, that's what basically led to it, was Ray's deciding to leave.
Right.
We made him suffer. We dragged it out. I had to be reminded of this not so long ago because it was a really frantically creative period, and in fact none of the material for Ariel had been written before the end of Spectrum. So at one time we were rehearsing a completely new repertoire with Ariel, recording Spectrum's last album, which was the Testimonial album, and it was just and sort of putting in the Terminal Buzz album together. So it was a very creative period. Well, it was Ariel Mark II that actually went to England. Ariel Mark I had already split the scene by then. I think we'd lasted 2 years. We recorded the album at the end of the first year, and at that stage, when we were recording the album, we were starting to notice things weren't going exactly right, and the rest of that year sort of said, okay, this is forget it, and how quickly can you do that? So unfortunately, that band, which was a mighty band, I mean, that album still is sort of musically is really dynamic, and everything that we'd wanted, we really wanted to contrast with Spectrum, which was really laid back. Well, Ariel was, the exact opposite of being laid back. It was kind of show. He used lots of flash bombs and wore really strange clothes, well, Tim Gaze was a terrific guitarist, and John Mills, he and John really took off together. And it could be a really brilliant band, but then on the other hand, disconcertingly for us, who were kind of used to really steady performances, it was really erratic. Like, it would be really great one night and really disgusting the next night. So inevitably the band broke up, and we were invited over to England on the strength of the Strange Fantastic Dream album, which is their Ariel Part 1 album, and we went over with Ariel Part 2, and I'd spent a few months writing this concept album, and we'd rehearsed it. This is with Harvey James and John Lee and Bill and myself. We'd rehearsed it religiously, and then just before just when we got to England, they said, "Forget that. You'll have to do something else, because we're not into concept albums. Our vaults are full of concept albums which are never going to see the light of day." So we said, "Okay, thanks." Stymied as far as doing the Mutant album, so we revised a few of the old tunes.
No, that's what I was just going to say. We were there to do one thing. We went over there to record one type of album, which we were well prepared for and well rehearsed and had it all down. And then the record company pulled that one, so we kind of went into the studio with, well, what are we going to do now?
And it was really traumatic, all this sort of stuff. I mean, the demise of Ariel Part 1 was really kind of traumatic, and then going over to England and recording that album. Well, the album was actually fun to do, but the overall experience was kind of traumatic again, because it was a put-together band. In fact, both Ariels were put-together bands, whereas Spectrum, it was kind of organic, it grew. It was a very hippie sort of band without our realising it, but it kind of grew naturally, whereas both Ariels were kind of rushed together and thrown together, and eventually the disparate personalities pulled it all apart. And it was done in public, which was nice, in England, which was even nicer. So we came back kind of a broken band, really. We went over twice to England, and with both we added Glyn Mason, I think, for the
John had left. John, the drummer, had left by then, and we got then we got Nigel, the Ariel drummer, back for the second journey to England. Actually, he was over there.
Yes,
Nigel was over there, right? John was leaving, so we got Nigel back.
That's right.
Recycled drummers.
Yeah, so we were an unsettled sort of band, and Bill and I were starting to wonder, because we were the only two constants in all these events going on. If you had a time-lapse camera, you would have seen us looking bemused in the middle of all this activity going on, and all these people running around at 1,000,000 miles an hour, going, "I'm leaving, I'm staying, I'm going, I'm leaving, see you."
We might take in the second live one for the night.
We might?
Yep.
What are we going to do, though? Well, look, we're going to be doing the Bert Newton show on Friday, and this is the number that we're anticipating doing, called We Saw It Coming. It's one of the songs that my wife and myself are hoping are going to be included in a concept. Is that word again?
Not another concept.
Okay,
album.
well, all right, then a musical. A rock musical. No, well, anyway, it hasn't got very far, and this is one of the songs from it. well, theoretically, called "We Saw It Coming." We saw it coming, we had our eyes open. We are sadder but much wiser now. I was wishing and you were hoping. We saw it coming, we had our eyes open. Love on the rebound is not recommended. In faraway places, a shoulder to cry on. We fight back the tears of joy and of sadness. Hold on to each other, alone in the crowd. I thought for a moment there was something between us, a spark to ignite my smoldering heart. But all we can do is hold on to each other and stop each other from falling apart. I knew this would happen the moment I saw you. We both knew the ending before we began, and all we can do is hold on to each other. We saw it coming, yeah. We saw it coming, yeah. We saw it coming, we had our eyes open. We are sadder but much wiser now, and all we can do is hold on to each other. We saw it coming, yeah. We saw it coming, yeah. We saw it coming, yeah. We saw it coming, yeah.
To the Goodnight Fiona album. The music seemed to, well, to me, seemed to go in another direction, a little bit more American orientated. Would that be a fair statement?
I think the writing credits started to be spread out a bit more evenly, and Glenn was contributing a bit, and his style of writing was quite a bit different from mine. And maybe you could say it was more American orientated. I don't really think. I think possibly that album marked our transition from a creative band in an organic sort of way, or even a very fast creative sort of way, into a band that was responding to the demands of the perceived demands of an audience, of a live audience. So I think it was, yes, it sort of marked a start of a decline actually in the creative process, and maybe that this. I mean, I'm not saying that Glenn's songs were there was anything wrong with using them at all. It's just that I think that it kind of marked that kind of decline.
And Tony
attitude.
Slatich, who was playing keyboards
That's
at the time, he was writing as well. So we went from a band with basically one writer. Tim added a bit in Ariel,
Yes.
but basically one writer from Spectrum right the way through, which gave you a clear, strong direction. Suddenly there was 3 writers throwing in their bits, and also we were under quite a bit of pressure for years, really, with management type people saying that we were too weird and could we get a bit more commercial. Silly to say, play I'll Be Gone again. Write another one. Why can't you write another I'll Be Gone? So, after about 8 years of being badgered by that side of the fence, hence that type of Ariel, I guess.
It's probably haunted you for years, hasn't it?
And Michael was right. It was the end of the real creative process. We were trying to fit a market which we were told was there. We don't fit. We can't work that way. If we have to write for a specific market, then we will fall short of the mark probably.
Yeah.
So we have to.
Now, Ariel disbanded shortly after you changed labels. You went from CBS to Image, wasn't it?
Well, I think Image was yes,
we
that's
did,
right.
that's
Yeah,
right.
that's right.
Yeah. It just seems strange to go to a new deal and then all of a sudden split the band. Was it sort of unexpected happening? Or?
Well, as I said, I think that the creative side of things had kind of diminished a little bit. It wasn't as important as it was, and we were kind of starting to look at the market and look at making money on the road kind of thing and becoming a successful on the road entity, and that was becoming harder. And I think that's what happened there. The Ariel couldn't survive under that kind of pressure, and so we called it a day.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't think that bands, if they're on the road and they're not getting a hell of a lot out of it, can last much longer than 2 years. It's irrelevant these days because you can't actually do that. You can't say put a band together and go out on the road. That concept just doesn't happen anymore, whereas it used to happen then.
Like you could work 5-6 nights a week all year round for a year on end, which is basically what we did. So in the first 2 years, did the first Ariel last 2 years, did it?
It was
1.
4 years. Well,
Ariel
2
1.
years. Ariel 1, yeah, 2 years.
because boy, that was like hard yakka. 5-6 nights a week, up and down the coast, across to Perth and back and forth and so on. So 2 years worth of gigs. Now, to do the same volume of gigs these days would take you about 6 years, 7 years to cover the same volume. So 2 years, everyone was. If you didn't crack emotionally or mentally, there were guys who couldn't cut it physically. I mean, it was a physically demanding thing. You couldn't go out raging every single night and carry on because you had to be up early for another gig somewhere or something. And a lot of guys, I remember a couple of managers talking at Premier Artist saying about this band, the band Rabbit. Said, put them on the road, we'll sort them out, sort out the men from the mice. And, I mean, it's a rather callous attitude, but the band loved it. Thought, yeah, let's go on the road, hey, big tour. Well, 12 months later, the guitar player was physically unwell. He was not a real strapping sort of a dude anyway. And 12 months on the road, and he was just physically burnt out. He couldn't sort of keep it together. And so he left the band, or was told to leave the band, and they got somebody else in. But this talk about killing the golden goose. He was the guy who wrote all the songs. So the management put him on the road, wipe that guy out, get a new guy who doesn't write songs, and the band falls apart a few months later because the original songwriter's gone. It's just crazy. They can't do that anymore because if you do 3 gigs a week these days, you're working real hard. That's almost a tour.
Yeah. One more live one.
Yep, we'll do an instrumental for you called Indian Summer.
Lovely.
Very nice.
After Ariel, we had Instant Replay.
Hmm.
Didn't actually put anything down on record, did it?
No, but on the other hand, it was our most successful, as far as making money was concerned, band.
Really?
Yes, it was only on the road for about 6 months.
No, it was 3 months. We did it 3 months at a time.
Yeah,
And,
3 months. wasn't
Yeah,
it?
2-3 months breaks. It was at the end of Ariel. I remember the pathetic wage we were receiving, and I remember our management and the road crew and the agency people all jumping up and down, going no, and all getting really worried about the band splitting up and all that stuff. And I thought, gee, aren't they loyal and lovely guys? But then when I thought about it, they were the guys making all the money. I mean, the road crew were making 3 or 4 times more than we were, and the management was making about 4 more times than that. And they all had a lot to lose financially, but we certainly didn't, because we were on well below the basic wage. So after an experience like that, we wanted some money, and so we put this. We'll go out and play all our hits or best ofs, and do it for 3 months, and then that's it.
Mhm.
And we could sell it well that way too, by because there was an ending date. They knew that after that there was no more. So the agency went silly and booked us anywhere and everywhere, and we did all the gigs, and we actually made real money for the first time in our lives, really, because Spectrum we never really made any money out of Spectrum, and Ariel we never made money out of Ariel. So this was a real treat for us to be on the road and actually have real money. So at the end of 3 months, I went to America and
Came back.
right, and said, let's do it. I'm out of money, let's do it again. So we did it again for another 3 months, and with some different members, and then at the end of that time we had some money, and Michael and I and a couple of other guys went to the States and spent it all observational research.
It's great fun.
It was great, yeah.
Boy, did we observe.
We got some great photos.
All right. So, would you consider doing something like that again? If
No.
Well, we did a Spectrum revival thing, a touring thing in, I think it was 84, and it just proved that if you're going to do something like that, you've got to promote it to the hilt, and this was kind of half-hearted, not from our point of view. We actually got Ray Arnott back, which was a real effort to do that on Ray's behalf and our behalf, and we toured, and we ended up by making nothing out of that. It was really as an exercise in making money, it was a disaster. We actually enjoyed it, and there were a couple of things
was really
we did.
good.
Yeah, it was a good band. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got the ABC video that.
All right. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that was fun to do.
Okay. After Instant Replay was the Heaters. That was a very modern sounding outfit at the time, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, I guess.
Yeah.
Again, I think that marks a further decline and an attempt to sort of respond to a perceived market. And mind you, I think the songs are better than the performances ended up being recorded, but that's another story.
And you went back to one of your old producers for the Unrealist album, Howard Gable.
Yes. And that was, again,
Another story.
But
Yeah.
it ended up everything we were turning was touching to mud at that stage. So that just marked.
Even at the end of at the actual recording process, which was done here at a studio in Melbourne, when they came to mix, they discovered that the actual tape was coming apart in the machine. So when they were, because Michael and I had nothing to do with the mixing of that record at all. In fact, it was done in Sydney under Howard's wing, and apparently on a couple of songs they had once more through and that's it, because after that the tape's chewed and there is no more. So they had a couple of run throughs and then they had to do the mix, and that was it. After that you couldn't redo it, and everyone jumped up and down, but as it turned out they said it was just a faulty batch of tape. So that includes the mud rave that Michael was talking about. So.
You dabbled in a bit of production yourself too around this time, didn't you?
Well, I started to get into the management side of things, which I'm seriously ill-equipped to do. Fundamentally, I'm being honest, you see. and that's you can't really do that being a manager or an agent or any of those kind of people. You've got to be able to soften the truth, shall we say, to make things a bit more palatable for everybody concerned.
Man. You have to tell lies.
You have to
blatant lies with a smile on your face and a twinkle in your eye. And
they loved you,
handshake.
but they're not booking you back. But anyway, yes, I got involved with a band from Newcastle called Daniel, who I thought showed a hell of a lot of potential. They sounded real great, and I got to know a couple of the guys really well, and that was a lot of fun and good socially as well as I enjoyed the band. And eventually I got in to record them with the Image label. And funnily enough, the first single did quite well. Got picked up in South Australia and did very well over there, and there were all kind of good signs for the future. So we recorded an album, which was I quite enjoyed that. It did feature the Great Chocolate Malted Disaster, which was I've never had a chocolate malted since then. We were recording, and there was a chocolate malted that had been brought in specially for me, sitting on the side of the console. And for some reason I grabbed it and tipped it all over the console, and we lost an entire day scraping out the remnants of chocolate malted out of the desk. Fortunately, we didn't lose anything out of it apart from time, but it really put me off chocolate malted.
Boy, that was amazing. And 24 tracks, and it's just this sheet of milk goes flying across the 24 down all the holes and all the little groovy bits.
Great. And he's never had a
I enjoyed that. There were some interesting things on it. We used a whole lot of strings, real strings, and this was synthesizers weren't that large at that particular time, but we used real strings and a lot of them, and it sounded good, I thought.
So what happened to those guys?
Well, they yes. Well, this is kind of, you got to tie this in with my management expertise here. We got to deal with Yamaha, who shall remain nameless, and they were to play in clinics all around Australia, and theoretically they were to be bolstered by gigs, of course, to make some real money. But more often than not, it ended up by being a clinic with a couple of really poorly paying gigs, and these guys were travelling hundreds of miles to get to them, and it was just mind-sapping stuff. And it ended up with the Great Truck Disaster of all time, which was just a classic. And fortunately, at that stage, I thought I got away with it scot-free because I'd hide the truck. But a couple of years later, the summons arrived at the door, and I ended up by paying out a few $1,000. But I really got off lightly with that because it was the classic truck crash, and it basically destroyed the band. And they ran off in 50 million directions. Most of them ended up back in Newcastle.
All right. Oh, what a shame.
Yes.
And like, whoa, hey, you have to be real careful.
Talking briefly about why before, you had a bit of European interest there, didn't you?
Well, we actually went over to Germany and did some recording which never saw the light of day. There was Klaus Schulze, who was the drummer with Tangerine Dream, had subsequent to Tangerine Dream had a bit of luck with his recording ventures, ended up with a label, and came to Australia as part of the Around the World thing, gleaning acts that he was interested in, picking them up, and we ended up by being one of those and going over to Germany to record, and it was a very interesting experience. Mind you, his empire, by the time, it was just typical of our luck, I suppose, that his empire was starting to disintegrate by that stage. So that played a part in the fact that the recording wasn't exactly a highlight of the trip. But we ended up by doing, as part of the video side of it, because Y was a video performance experiment. We had a video projector and a video screen up on stage, which was synced to our drum machine, which we played along with. So the images and the music were synced together, and it was a concept that, at its best, people would walk away going, "Great idea." But I think really we learned from that technology, that kind of advanced technology, has to be really I just saw a bit of the zoo trip happening with U2. Now, if you're prepared to spend the megabucks on it, you can get something that you can integrate successfully. But at the kind of level we were operating on, it was very hard to make a success of it. And I suppose we had 2 or 3 nights out of the whole duration of the band that you could say were real successful. But the rest of the time, we kind of missed the mark. People were going, "Where's the drummer?" and other smart remarks.
Yeah,
So
we learned not to get in on the ground floor.
yes, especially of technology, because we got in the ground floor of video technology and projection and so forth. It cost us a fortune, and again, this kind of added up to the non-liquidity in the end.
And hence the Spectrum reunion.
Exactly.
Yeah,
yes.
right. Uh-huh. Yeah, pet name for your drum machine too, didn't you?
Harold, yeah, Weird Harold.
Weird
actually,
Harold,
yeah.
that's right.
That's the nice names.
Yeah.
Nice
Had some real bad ones for him too when he.
But that was at the beginning of the technology, and that was when Oberheim were. I don't know whether they still exist, but I've still got that DMX at home, sitting there throbbing away.
Going to drag him out of mothballs one day? Or?
Oh well, he's still in current use.
I think we
in
should
the music
make
room.
sure he stays indoors.
But he gets a good whipping every now and again.
Changes in the Australian music industry over your time. Do you sort of sit back and feel some satisfaction that you may have had something to do with any at all?
It's hard for us to judge. It's really for other people to judge. But the fact that we were an original band and we had a certain amount of product out must ultimately influence other people, I guess. As to how much you influence people, it's really hard to know. But there is a recognised Australian scene, I guess, and it's really on an international footing now. So that's good. That's the good side of it. But it means that you've the dimensions of the thing have changed dramatically. You've got bands like In Excess, who you could say are Australian but are never in Australia. AC/DC again, they're kind of mega Australian bands, but they very rarely can afford to play in this country. Now, when we were actively on the road, bands actually spent their whole life playing in the same gigs, and you could evolve from being a really small support band into being a mega band playing at the same gigs, and the only difference is the amount of equipment you had, and of course the amount of money you're able to get. That doesn't happen anymore. And I think in a lot of ways that's kind of good, but it means that it's very hard for bands to actually get up and play and make a living out of it anymore. And I think that's kind of a pity, because Australian bands were good at that.
Yeah, I think it's almost impossible at this stage of the proceedings. Well, our mates are either unemployed or doing other things. There's only a very small handful of guys who are actually earning their complete living from music.
And they have to do several things. They have to be multi-talented and play in several different bands, and maybe deal with several different styles of bands to be able to make a living as a musician. So, in a lot of cases, and then a lot of them have maybe gone over to advertising and in other areas like that, where there's skill involved, but it doesn't actually breed a lot of originality.
Yeah, look, we want to do as much work and make as much money and get our records released and
Enjoy
turn our
ourselves.
lives around, and so we can get back on the road and do what we do best.
Right, there is a possibility of a new release.
Yes, there is.
We've been we started recording last year, and we're still on the remix stage with that, but that could be out any moment. We'll keep you posted.
Could happen any time, independently.
Most
Who
likely.
knows?
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Maybe not.
We don't know yet.
Right, and that's as the trio.
No, this
No,
is
that's-
basically Bill and myself and other players and synthesizers and so forth. The stuff that when we came off the road in '85, we started writing and recording in the studio, and we made a kind of album-length collection of songs from the music room where we did the recording, and that was heard last year, and we've basically recorded that properly, re-recorded it properly, and it's could be out any time.
And that instrumental we played before is on it with the full drums and basses and violins and seagulls. And what else do we play tonight? Oh no, that's the only one that's on it. The others are not recorded yet.
So, after all this, any regrets at all?
Well, yes, of course. It would be nice to be rich as well as famous. You know. I think Paul Hogan said recently that it's a real drag being famous and not having anything to show for it. But at the same time, we find there are a lot of people around who remember us and know of us and appreciate what we're doing and are hanging out for us to do something that will engender all that sort of stuff. So, no, we don't have any regrets. We look on it as a stepping stone. And, I mean, strangely enough, we never, well, as far as I'm concerned anyway, never really had a terrific lot of ambition to sacrifice everything for success. There was always, even in the decline of the various bands, and there was some kind of modicum of wanting to do something with integrity. And we've always managed to keep a little bit of integrity there, and I think that's kind of important for us. And although we kind of cringe a bit at some of the things that we've done in the past, you can't deny that we did it with the best intentions. So, no, I don't really have any regrets.
Well, I think we'll let this
hang
fella.
on, you started off by saying yeah.
No, he hasn't.
Saying no, he hasn't.
Well, look, I'm a walking paradox.
Okay.
Now, what's your story, Bill?
Bill's got some regrets.
Oh man.
There again, too many to mention.
Yeah, how long have we got? Most of my regrets are with women.
Really?
Not too many musical regrets. There's a few people I wish I had punched, and I never did that. I regret that. But mostly female things.
No musical regrets. Okay, we hope you don't regret coming here.
No, this has been
This is
a
going to
novelty.
go
It's
down
been
as
an
a real
experience.
special night, I can tell you.
And
We'd